The breaking point, the massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the most important room in known space. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the entrance, her black diplomatic uniform crisp and professional. Behind her, Captain Marcus Reed followed in his navy blue military dress uniform, his expression stern but controlled. They had been preparing for this moment for months, knowing it would likely be their last chance at peaceful resolution. The council chamber was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy. Built into the heart of Harmony Prime, the neutral station that served as the galaxy's political center, it could house representatives from over 50 different species. Today, 12 species sat at the curved amphitheater-style seating arrangement, each delegation positioned according to their influence and power within the galactic community. At the center of it all sat Speaker Corvash, a towering reptilian being whose scales shifted from deep green to bronze depending on his mood. His species, the Zalari, had been mediating galactic conflicts for over 3 centuries. Next to him, Admiral Thane of the Avian Consortium preened his silver feathers while reviewing data tablets with his sharp, predatory eyes. Sarah took her place at the small podium reserved for the human delegation. The size difference was intentional and insulting. While the major powers had elaborate seating areas with multiple representatives, humanity was given space for exactly 2 people. After 18 months of negotiations, she had grown tired of the symbolism. The council recognizes Ambassador Chen of the Terran Republic, Speaker Corvash announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came with representing the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. We trust you have considered our latest proposal. Sarah opened her briefcase and withdrew a single sheet of paper. The terms written on it represented everything wrong with the current galactic order. She had read them so many times that every word was burned into her memory. Speaker Corvash, honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, humanity has indeed considered your proposal. We have spent considerable time analyzing each point, consulting with our governments, and weighing the long-term implications. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant hum of the station's life support systems seemed to fade as every being present focused on her words. Your terms require humanity to abandon our 7 newest colonies, relocate those populations to designated areas under council supervision, and submit to a military oversight committee that would effectively control our defensive capabilities, Sarah continued. In exchange, we would receive protection from the very species that have been attacking our shipping lanes and mining operations. Admiral Thane's feathers ruffled slightly. The Avian Consortium had been one of the primary aggressors in the conflicts that had brought humanity to the negotiating table in the first place. The proposal also demands that we share all technological innovations with the Council before implementing them ourselves, and that we contribute 40% of our industrial output to the Council's common reserves. Sarah's voice remained steady, but those who knew her could hear the steel beneath her diplomatic tone. Additionally, we would be required to seek Council approval for any expansion beyond our current territorial boundaries. She paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of beings who had shaped galactic politics for centuries. Some showed open disdain, others mild curiosity, but none displayed what she hoped to see: understanding or respect. These terms, Sarah said, closing the folder, are not a peace agreement. They are terms of surrender for a war we never started and battles we never lost. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Several delegates activated their translation devices, speaking rapidly in their native languages. This was not the response they had expected. Speaker Corvash raised one of his massive clawed hands, and silence returned. Ambassador Chen, your species has been involved in 17 separate conflicts over the past 2 years. Your expansion has disrupted established trade routes and territorial boundaries. The Council's proposal ensures stability and prevents future conflicts. Disrupted whose trade routes? Captain Reed stepped forward, his military bearing commanding attention. The shipping lanes we use were empty space before we arrived. The territories we've settled were unclaimed worlds that no other species wanted because they lacked immediate value. Admiral Thane's head snapped toward Reed with the quick, precise movement of a predator. Captain, your people's aggressive expansion threatens the delicate balance we have maintained for generations. The Council exists to prevent the chaos that comes from unregulated growth. Marcus Reed had fought in 3 separate conflicts against avian raiders who had attacked human cargo vessels. He had seen the aftermath of their balance firsthand. Admiral Thane, with respect, the only chaos I've seen has come from established powers attacking newer species to maintain their dominance. The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah could see several delegates becoming agitated, their various forms of communication creating a low buzz of anger and frustration. The Council has offered humanity a place in the galactic community, spoke Councillor Nexus, a crystalline being whose voice resonated like wind chimes. Your rejection of our guidance shows the arrogance typical of younger species. Sarah felt something shift inside her. For 18 months, she had endured condescending comments about humanity's youth, their inexperience, their need for guidance from their betters. She had swallowed her pride and her anger, believing that patience and diplomacy would eventually lead to fair treatment. Councillor Nexus, she said, her voice carrying a new edge, humanity has been spacefaring for over 2 centuries. We have established peaceful relations with dozens of species, built thriving colonies on worlds others considered uninhabitable, and contributed scientific and cultural advances that have benefited the entire galaxy. She stood straighter, her diplomatic training warring with her growing anger. What we have not done is attack other species shipping, raid their colonies, or demand tribute from those weaker than ourselves. Perhaps that is why you consider us inexperienced. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. There was no rustling of papers, no quiet conversations, no fidgeting. Every being present understood that something fundamental had just shifted. Speaker Corvash leaned forward, his scales darkening to a deep bronze. Ambassador Chen, are you refusing the Council's generous offer of protection and guidance? Sarah looked at the paper in her hands one more time. 18 months of negotiations, compromises, and concessions had led to this moment. She thought about the human colonies that had been attacked while the Council debated. She thought about the families who had lost everything while waiting for galactic justice. She thought about the miners who had died when their asteroid stations were raided while the Council formed committees to study the problem. Speaker Corvash, she said, her voice carrying a clarity that surprised even her, humanity respectfully declines your offer. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Delegates began speaking over each other in a dozen different languages. Warning lights flashed as emotional stress sensors detected the rising tension. Security protocols activated, sealing the chamber. To prevent any violence, Admiral Thane rose from his seat, his wings spreading wide in a display of aggression. You cannot simply refuse, human. The Council's decision is final. The Council's decision, Captain Reed said, stepping beside Sarah, assumes we need your permission to exist. Speaker Corvash's voice boomed over the chaos. Order. Order in the chamber. The delegates gradually quieted, but the tension remained thick enough to cut with a blade. Ambassador Chen, Corvash continued, his voice now carrying an unmistakable threat. Your species is small and isolated. Without Council protection, you will not survive the conflicts that will inevitably arise. Sarah smiled, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably at the expression. It was not the smile of a desperate diplomat begging for mercy. It was the smile of someone who had just realized they held better cards than they had previously thought. Speaker Corvash, honored delegates, she said, gathering her materials, humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the challenge of leaving our home planet to explore the galaxy. We have thrived on worlds that would kill most species, developed technologies that others said were impossible, and built a civilization based on the principle that all thinking beings deserve dignity and respect. She closed her briefcase with a decisive snap. If the Council believes we cannot survive without your protection, you are welcome to test that assumption. Captain Reed moved toward the chamber's exit, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. Not in threat, but in confidence. We came here seeking partners, he said without turning around. Instead, we found owners who expected us to be grateful for the privilege of serving them. Sarah joined him at the exit, turning back to address the chamber one final time. The Terran Republic formally withdraws from these negotiations. We will chart our own course through the galaxy, with or without the Council's approval. The massive doors slid open, and both humans walked through them without looking back. Behind them, the chamber exploded into arguments and accusations as Delegates tried to process what had just happened. In the corridor outside, Sarah and Marcus walked in silence until they reached their shuttle bay. Only then did Sarah allow herself to show the emotions she had been hiding. "That felt good," she said, surprising herself with the relief in her voice. Marcus nodded, his military training keeping his expression neutral even as his eyes showed satisfaction. "It did. Now comes the hard part. You think they'll try to make an example of us?" "I think they'll try," Marcus replied, checking his communication device. "The question is whether they are prepared for what we've been planning." As their shuttle departed Harmony Prime, neither human saw the emergency session that began immediately after their departure. They didn't witness the panic that spread through the council as delegates realized that for the first time in centuries, a species had simply walked away from their authority. What they also didn't see was the encrypted message that Captain Reed sent to Earth as soon as they cleared the station's communication jamming field. 3 words that would change everything: Phoenix is go. Deep in the Sol system, on a dozen hidden construction facilities, humanity began to reveal what they had been building during 18 months of seemingly futile negotiations. The Council had seen humanity's patience as weakness, their diplomatic efforts as desperation, and their small military as proof of their vulnerability. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to adapt, innovate, and unite when faced with impossible odds. The Council wanted to know if humanity could survive without their protection. They were about to get their answer. The reckoning 6 months had passed since humanity walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, and the galaxy had not seen a single human ship outside of their home systems. Trade routes that had carried human goods fell silent. Diplomatic channels went unanswered. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from galactic affairs. On Harmony Prime, Speaker Corvash stood before a wall of monitors displaying intelligence reports from across human space. The information was contradictory and confusing. Some reports indicated massive construction projects, others suggested civil war, and a few claimed the humans had simply given up and retreated to their home worlds. "Status report," he commanded, his scales shifting to an anxious yellow-green. "Intelligence Director Vex, an insectoid being with compound eyes that could process multiple data streams simultaneously, activated the main display. Sir, our surveillance efforts have been largely unsuccessful. Human space has become increasingly difficult to monitor." "What do you mean, difficult?" Admiral Thane ruffled his feathers impatiently. "They are a single species with limited technology. Our sensor networks should be able to track every ship they have." Vex's antennae twitched nervously. "That's just it, Admiral. We are not detecting their ships anymore. Either they've stopped using them entirely, or what?" Corvash demanded. "Or they've developed stealth technology far beyond what we believed they possessed." The chamber fell silent. The idea that humanity could have made such a technological leap in just 6 months seemed impossible. They were still considered a young species, barely advanced enough to participate in galactic politics. Admiral Thane spread his wings in an aggressive display. "Impossible. We've been monitoring their technological development for decades. They are at least 50 years behind the major powers in most areas." "That's what our assessments indicated," Vex agreed. "However, there have been some disturbing developments." The display changed, showing a grainy image of what appeared to be a massive structure under construction in the asteroid belt of the Sol system. The image quality was poor, heavily distorted by some kind of interference. "This was taken by one of our deep space reconnaissance probes last week," Vex explained. "The probe was destroyed approximately 30 seconds after this image was transmitted." Corvash studied the image, his reptilian features showing confusion. "What am I looking at?" "We are not entirely sure, sir. The structure appears to be some kind of shipyard or manufacturing facility, but the scale is unlike anything we've seen before. Our analysts estimate it's at least 20 kilometers in length." The implications of that statement hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. 20 kilometers was larger than most space stations, certainly larger than anything humanity had ever built before. Council Nexus, the crystalline being, resonated with a sound like breaking glass. "How could they construct something of that magnitude without our knowledge?" "Sir," Vex continued, "that's not the only anomaly. We've detected similar structures in 7 other human systems. All heavily shielded, all defended by unknown technology that can destroy our surveillance equipment. Admiral Thane's head snapped up with predatory alertness. Defended? By what? Unknown, sir. The probes simply have stopped functioning. No energy. Discharge, no projectile weapons, no obvious cause. They just ceased to exist. For a moment, the only sound in the chamber was the hum of the station's life support systems. Then Korvash spoke, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that had never been there before. What about their colonies? The outer settlements? That's another anomaly, sir. The settlements we expected to find abandoned after they rejected our protection are not only still inhabited, they appear to be thriving. Moreover, they've been reinforced with defensive installations that weren't there 6 months ago. The display changed again, showing orbital images of human colonies that the Council had written off as indefensible. Instead of the struggling frontier settlements they expected to see, the images showed thriving cities protected by orbital platforms and defensive grids. How is this possible? Councillor Zara of the Aquatic Alliance asked, her gill slits fluttering with agitation. They don't have the industrial capacity for this kind of development. Director Vex's compound eyes shifted to focus on her. That's what we believed, Councillor. However, our economic analysis suggests we may have severely underestimated human manufacturing capabilities. A new set of charts appeared on the display, showing resource flows and energy consumption patterns across human space. The numbers were staggering. According to our calculations, human industrial output has increased by over 300% in the past 6 months. Energy consumption has risen by 400%. Most significantly, their resource extraction operations have expanded into previously untapped asteroid fields and planetary systems. Admiral Thane's voice carried a note of disbelief. These numbers suggest a level of coordination and efficiency that should be impossible for a species without centralized galactic authority. Unless, Speaker Korvash said slowly, they created their own authority. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber. The Galactic Council's power had always rested on the assumption that individual species needed their mediation and guidance to achieve large-scale cooperation. The idea that humanity had somehow unified and organized themselves without Council oversight challenged the very foundation of galactic politics. There's more, sir, Director Vex continued. We've detected unusual quantum signatures throughout human space. The pattern suggests they've developed some form of instantaneous communication network. Instantaneous communication? Korvash's scales darkened. That's theoretically impossible. The quantum entanglement required would demand resources beyond any single species' capabilities. Yet the evidence suggests they've achieved it. Their response times to events across their territory are far too fast for conventional communication methods. As if summoned by their discussion, the chamber's main communication console began flashing with an incoming priority message. The comm officer, a young Zalari named Kess, looked up with confusion. Sir, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. It's being broadcast to every council member world simultaneously. Korvash felt his scales shift to a deep, worried bronze. From whom? The signal identifies itself as coming from the Terran Collective. The what? Admiral Thane demanded. Humans don't have a collective. They are organized into individual nation-states. Not anymore, apparently, Kess replied, his voice showing his own confusion. Sir, should I put it through? Korvash looked around the chamber at the other delegates. All showed various expressions of concern and curiosity. Finally, he nodded. Put it through. The main display cleared, and a new image appeared. It showed a human woman, but not one they recognized. She wore a uniform that was clearly military in design but unlike anything in their databases. Behind her, a massive command center bustled with activity, showing technology that looked decades ahead of what they believed humans possessed. Greetings to the Galactic Council, the woman began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who held all the advantages. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, Supreme Commander of the Terran Collective Defense Force. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. This was the same Sarah Chen who had walked out of negotiations 6 months ago, but she looked different. More confident, more dangerous. 6 months ago, humanity withdrew from negotiations with the Council after your demands made it clear that you viewed us not as equals, but as subjects to be managed and controlled. Her image was replaced by a star map showing human space. But instead of the scattered, poorly defended colonies the Council expected, the map showed a network of fortified systems connected by what appeared to be massive infrastructure projects. During these months, humanity has undergone what we call the Great Unification. Our individual nations have joined together under a single government, our resources have been pooled for common defense, and our greatest minds have worked together to solve the challenges we face. The map zoomed in on several systems, showing shipyards, manufacturing facilities, and defensive installations on a scale that dwarfed anything the Council had imagined possible. The results speak for themselves. Humanity is no longer the struggling species that came to you seeking protection. We have become something new. Admiral Thane found his voice. What do you want, human? Sarah Chen's image returned and she smiled with an expression that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Admiral Thane, we want what we've always wanted, to exist in peace and dignity. The difference is that we no longer need your permission to do so. The display changed again, showing what appeared to be a massive fleet of ships unlike anything in Council databases. They were sleek, obviously advanced, and numerous enough to challenge any force in the galaxy. To those who might consider testing our resolve, we offer this demonstration of our new capabilities. The image shifted to show a barren asteroid field. Suddenly, space seemed to ripple, and a fleet of human ships appeared from nowhere. Without warning, they opened fire on the asteroids with weapons that didn't just destroy them, but seemed to unmake them at a molecular level. Cloaking technology, someone whispered. Molecular disruptors, another voice added. Impossible, Admiral Thane said, but his voice lacked conviction. The demonstration you just witnessed took place in the Kepler 442 system, approximately 3 light-years from your current position, Admiral Chen continued. Our fleet remains in the area, should you wish to verify these capabilities in person. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations as delegates tried to process what they were seeing. The technology being displayed was decades beyond what they had believed possible, and the implications were staggering. Humanity offers the following terms to the Galactic Council, Chen continued, her voice cutting through the chaos. First, immediate recognition of Terran collective sovereignty over all human-inhabited systems and any systems we choose to settle in the future. Unacceptable, Corvash began, but Chen continued without pause. Second, establishment of formal diplomatic relations based on equality and mutual respect. We will not accept the patronizing oversight that has characterized our previous interactions. Third, immediate cessation of all aggressive actions against human interests by any Council member species. This includes piracy, territorial violations, and economic warfare. Admiral Thane's feathers bristled. You cannot dictate terms to the Council. Admiral, Chen replied calmly, we are not dictating. We are informing. These are not demands we are making, they are conditions we are setting for future peaceful coexistence. And if the Council refuses? Speaker Corvash asked, though he suspected. He already knew the answer. Then the Council will discover that the age of unchallenged galactic dominance has ended. Humanity will forge its own path through the stars, with or without your approval. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. For several minutes, no one spoke as the implications of what they had just witnessed settled in. Finally, Councilor Nexus broke the silence. They are not bluffing, are they? Director Vex checked his instruments. Sir, I'm reading massive quantum signatures throughout human space. Whatever they've built, it's operational and ready for deployment. Speaker Corvash felt his scales shift through a spectrum of colors as he processed the situation. 6 months ago, humanity had been a minor species seeking the Council's protection. Now they were potentially the most powerful single force in the galaxy. How did we miss this? He asked, though he was speaking more to himself than to the chamber. Sir, Director Vex said quietly, I think we missed it because we were looking for the wrong things. We were watching for military build-ups, territorial Expansion, aggressive actions. We weren't looking for a species that could reinvent itself. Admiral Thane stood slowly, his predatory instincts finally recognizing that the balance of power had shifted. What do we do now? For the first time in his long career, Speaker Corvash didn't have an immediate answer. The Galactic Council had been built on the assumption that they would always be the dominant power in their region of space. That assumption had just been shattered by a species they had dismissed as too young and inexperienced to matter. We adapt, he said finally. Because if we don't, we may find ourselves facing a galaxy where humanity sets the rules instead of us. As emergency sessions began across Council space, one thing had become clear: the age of humanity asking for permission was over. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for the age of humanity taking what it needed to survive and thrive. In distant human space, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as her fleet prepared for whatever came next. They had taken the first step toward true independence. Now they would see if the galaxy could accept a new player in the game of galactic politics. The choice was no longer humanity's to make. It was the Council's, and for the first time in centuries, the Council would have to choose carefully.